You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, episode number 466. By the time a man is wise enough to watch his step, he's too old to go anywhere. Billy Crystal.
Broadcasting from the back alley in Hollywood, it's the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, where we show you how to survive and thrive as an indie filmmaker in the jungles of the film biz. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome to another episode of the Indie Film Hustle Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari. Today's show is sponsored by Indie Film Hustle's Filmmaker Process. We provide filmmakers with professional services to get their films or series funded, finished, and distributed. Some of the services we offer are pitch deck creation, film budgets and schedules, domestic and international sales estimates, legal contract templates, consulting, post-production services, script coverage, professional trailer editing, poster design, film deliverables, and production payroll. To learn more, go to www.filmmakerprocess.com. Today's show is sponsored by Rise of the Film Entrepreneur, how to turn your independent film into a profitable business. It's harder today than ever before for independent filmmakers to make money with their films. From predatory film distributors ripping them off to huckster film aggregators who prey upon them, the odds are stacked against the indie filmmaker. The old distribution model of making money with your film is broken, and there needs to be a change. The future of independent filmmaking is the entrepreneurial filmmaker or the filmtrepreneur. In Rise of the Filmtrepreneur, I break down how to actually make money with your film projects and show you how to turn your indie film into a profitable business. With case studies examining successes and failures, this book shows you the step-by-step method to turn your passion into a profitable career. If you're making a feature film, series, or any other kind of video content, the Filmtrepreneur method will set you up for success. The book is available in paperback, ebook, and of course, audiobook. If you want to order it, just head over to www.filmbizbook.com. That's filmbizbook.com. Well, guys, today on the show, we have a living legend. I was lucky enough to sit down and speak to the one, the only Billy Crystal. Now, if you don't know who Billy Crystal is, then you're probably a lot younger than I am, but Billy has been in films like Throw Mama from the Train, When Harry Met Sally, City Slickers, The Princess Bride, Analyze This, Analyze That, America's Sweethearts, Monsters, Inc. and its sequel, and many, many more films. He has also hosted the Oscars 9 times, has had a hit television show called The Comedians, was a writer and performer on Saturday Night Live, wrote and directed films like Mr. Saturday Night, Forget Paris, My Giant, American Sweethearts, and his latest film, Here Today, co-starring Tiffany Haddish. Now, it was an absolute honor to talk to Billy and, just talk to someone who had such an impact on my life growing up and throughout my life. Billy's always been there to make me smile in one way, shape, or form, and always do it with a little bit of heart, made you feel things just a little bit differently. It wasn't a cheap laugh. It was something that came from the soul in so many ways. And we also talk about that new film he just directed and wrote, Here Today with Tiffany Haddish, which I had the pleasure of watching. And I have to tell you, it is wonderful. And it's a film that we need right now in the world. It is funny. It is heartfelt. It makes you think. There's going to be a conversation afterwards. It just pulls on every single emotion you can imagine in this film. It is wonderful, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. So without any further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Billy Crystal. I'd like to welcome to the show Billy Crystal. How you doing, Billy?
I'm great. Nice to see you, Alex.
Thank you so much for being on the show. It is, I am humbled and honored to have you on the show. Truly, it is. When I was speaking to, like I was telling you earlier, I was speaking to my wife that I was going to have you on the show, and we both kind of geeked out a minute. It took us a minute. We kind of geeked out, and I mean, we just kind of like, oh my God, it's Mr. Crystal. I'm not going to embarrass you. But when I was growing up in high school, I was in a video store Wait a minute. Calm down.
I know. But, when I was a kid, I loved you.
No.
Before I was born, my mother was listening to City Slickers. I heard you in the womb.
No, I'm not that young. I'm not that young. Thank you, though, for saying that, but I'm not that young. When I was in high school, it was the late 80s, early 90s. So that was kind of like a really magical time for your career, from running Scared in 86, When Harry Met Sally, City Slickers, and that whole kind of that run. So, you've been a very big part of my life growing up, and I just want to say thank you. Before we even get started, thank you for all the amazing things you've done over the years. And now my daughters, when I told them, they go, my daughters now who are 9, they say, I told them like, they always want to know who I'm talking to. I'm like, I'm talking to Mr. Billy Crystal. And they tell me, and they go, City Slickers? And I go, really? Yeah, because I showed them City Slickers the other day. Literally, like probably a month or 2 ago, we showed them City Slickers, and they loved it. And then they go, what else has he done? I'm like, oh, he's Mike Wazowski. And their eyes just explode. They're like, you're talking to me.
When I have 4 grandchildren. So when they first started to be aware of Grandpa in a different way, other than the guy who carried them and put them into bed and stuff. So now we were walking in a very interesting, beautiful mall here called The Grove, and in LA, and some paparazzi just started taking pictures of us, and it was weird for them. What? Because I hadn't mentioned anything, and they were little, So I said, well, I'm in the movies. I do movies. And who? Well, I'm Mike Wazowski. And they flipped out. They just flipped out, like your daughters, except they're my granddaughters. So They would call the house looking for Mike Wazowski. So if I answered, hello, oh, is Mike there? I'd have to be, hold on, I'll get him. That went on for like 3 years. I mean, it was just I'll get him. Oh, I said, is it those kids again? Yeah, Mike. Oh. So I appreciate it. We have a new series coming out called Monsters at Work, which will debut July 2nd on the Disney Plus. We just finished 10 of them, John Goodman and I, and a whole new cast of wonderful new characters. So it'll be kicked up again, Listen, if it's Mike they know me by, I'm very happy about that. He's one of my, if not my favorite character I've ever played.
He's the Monsters Inc. I mean, we have to get started with Monsters Inc. I mean, when I first started, like that last scene, just like tears. I don't care if you don't have a heart, you have to cry in that movie. It's amazing. It's amazing. Now, how did I want to let the audience? I want to go back a little bit into your career. How did you get started in the business?
Well, it's 2 separate kind of answers, Alex. I mean, I got started when I was about 3-4 years old, literally making your parents laugh, your relatives laugh. I had 2 older, funny brothers. They're hilarious still. And, when you're the youngest and the shortest, you tend to be the loudest. So I had to fight for my spot, and usually when we had an act together, I would close. And I'd be on the coffee table, and I was sort of like a little Jewish Don Rickles at 3, 4, 5 years old. I could imitate them and so on and so forth. And that never stopped. That just has never stopped. And when I graduated from NYU Film School, I had 2 wonderful friends that we did improv together, because I was always, still doing comedy in some way. And we formed a comedy group, and we were together for a long time, like 4 years. But all during that time, I knew that I was sort of hiding, and that I needed to be out there by myself, that I was, at my heart, really a stand-up. And so after 4 years, towards the end, I was just a really mostly hard time. I had a baby already, and I was substitute teaching in the junior high school that I went to. And which was weird, because I'd be in the teacher's dining room, and they were teachers that I had. And now they said it's okay to call me by my first name, and I would say, no, you're still Mr. Graff, you're Mr. Tardino, I can't. So then we started working, and I said I just gotta get off on my own. And out of the blue, a friend of mine calls from NYU and said, listen, do you know anyone who could do stand up at a fraternity party a ZBT house on Mercer Street.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
In the Village, and I instantly said, I'll do it. And he goes, well, when did you start doing stand-up? I said, I've been doing it for a while. Lied my ass off. Put together a bunch of, like 10, 15 minutes that I thought would be okay. This was a Tuesday and the gig was a Friday night. This might work, that might work, but I just had to do it. And I got up there that night and I just exploded. I just improvised for like an hour, and there was no turning back. I mean, that was really it for me. So that was like 1973 and change.
And I mean, I've worked with stand-ups a lot in my career as a director, and it's hard to improv. It is hard to get up on that stage and do. And you always think you're the funny guy. You're like, oh yeah, I could tell jokes, with 3 or 4 people, but you get in front of a bunch of strangers with that light on you and that mic, all of a sudden you're not as cute as you might have thought you were.
Yeah, it's until you get your feet underneath you and your brain working the right way, right, and you're able to put yourself into your act, and not just do like an act, but talk about what's important to you and find the funny about that. Then that's really something, For me, it's all these years later, there's only a few places I'm really comfortable in my own skin, and on stage is one of them.
Now, what did stand-up do as far as helping you prepare for the very gentle and inviting and warm film industry? I got to think about that because it's hard when you do your own things and you believe in what you're doing, and then suddenly as you're starting to show work to people who tell you no, or we don't like that, we like this, and it's a different audience. And a powerful one because they can say yes or no. Mm-hmm. So that was, it still is always a challenge. That's why I, with Here Today, I am so thrilled that we were able to get something made and finished during the pandemic, but that we were able to write a funny, moving movie, a full emotional journey for an audience, and I have to say, at this age, to get something done and have people embrace it, the studio people embrace it, like Sony has with this movie. So it's but the stand-up, it's always the place that I return to for new ideas. Mm-hmm. If and money, but it's I mean, mostly money. It's mostly money. Let's just be honest.
It's a downtime, and God knows there have been. This isn't happening. That's not happening. What? If I can, let's book some dates, and I'll go out on the road. Like 3 years ago, I did 35 cities, and I had the greatest time. And then your mind starts getting all oiled up. And you start seeing things differently. And then, we were on the road, and Janice and I have been married almost 51 years. So right from the beginning, she'd be making notes in the audience for me, or I'd run back to the motel after I did a gig, and she'd be there and we'd go over the notes and so on. So now, 3 years ago, we're running back to the hotel and doing the notes. We just, and then seeing, that could be this, that could go that could be, that's funny. That didn't work. And then it's all how it started out, and it all feels very right.
That's amazing. And it's amazing that, that you still, as you were explaining it to me, you were like a 20-year-old. You were like a kid, like, yeah. And then we got this and that, the juice is flowing, and we got this and that and this and that. And it is fascinating, the creative mind and how it works, especially, again, the stand-up comic is a very interesting creature, to say the least.
Well, the thing about it I love the most are the surprises.
Right.
And it's thrilling. It is absolutely thrilling when you can knit together an entire sequence off the top of your head because the juice of the audience is so good. And then it's like, you know, there's a power about it that's it's very hard to explain unless you experience it yourself. You're walking, you're talking, you're thinking ahead. It's almost like chess. There's 3 moves. You're setting up things. You're setting the audience up where they don't see it coming. But when you get on a riff and it just comes, and you get on a roll, it's really something. It still is a great feeling to have.
Now, I have to ask you this because my father told me I have to ask you this. He was a monstrous fan of Soap. One of your early shows that really arguably blew you into the mainstream a bit, and your character Jodie that you brought to life on Soap I remember watching it later, like when I was in high school. I would watch episodes, and my father was just obsessed. He couldn't stop laughing with that film, with that show. But it was a pretty bold character in the late 70s to be bringing out a gay character on television. Were you the first? I don't even know if you were the first.
Yeah, I was the first recurring starring character in a network television show. Right. There were other like films, sure. But nobody, approached it with humor.
Right.
The way that the brilliant, really, they say, boys, he's a genius. Susan Harris, who created Soap, was a genius to me. She wrote the first 65 or 68 episodes all by herself.
Wow.
For a lot of characters. We had at least 12 main characters and then supporting characters and one-page people and so on and so forth that would come in and out of the story. The jokes were great. The characters were fantastic, an amazing cast. And Jodie Dallas was, when they approached me about playing him after seeing me on a Tonight Show with Johnny, and I met with him, and I was nervous about it until I met with him. And it was Susan and her late husband, Paul Witt, and Tony Thomas, great producers. And to me, the best director in television at the time, Jay Sandrich, who was Mary Tyler Moore director and just, one of the MTM heavyweights. And we talked for a long time about, well, where's he going? What's to be said? How honest is this going to be? How, and it started out honestly a little rubbery, I thought. And then it settled into a real interesting, thoughtful, funny, stood up for himself, strong character who knew who he was at most of the time. There was some confusion about to himself, his own sexuality and so on. But then, he just was very endearing to people. Wow. And it was 4 years of it. And I think the test of it, Alex, was he had a one-night stand and he ends up fathering a baby girl.
Yeah.
And his the mother sues for custody. And it was a big court battle. That was my story, because it was a soap opera. So that, your story comes around every couple of months sometimes, which was frustrating. But Jodie wins custody of the baby. And they did a poll. I remembered, I guess ABC did it, who should get the baby. And it was almost unanimous that Jodie should get the child. And I thought that was the victory of the character.
Wow.
That the trust for a single gay man to get custody of the child. So I'm very proud of those years. It was 4 years. I saw on Twitter, I don't know, 2 weeks ago was the last episode of Soap aired in 1981. Right. So I guess 2 weeks ago. I don't know. But it was a great group of actors to work with that really were supportive of me. knowing the pressure that I was under.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
And Richard Mulligan, who played Burt Campbell, was a genius. And Catherine Hellman, who passed away last year, also just really nurtured me. Mm-hmm. And Robert Guillaume, bless his soul, who played Benson.
Yeah.
But Bob was very, he's such a strong man that to play a black servant for white people, rich white people, that he played it with dignity and with humor, and sometimes was the only sane one in the cast, and sometimes we were both portrayed that way. The only two sane people are the gay guy and Benson. Back then they would say stuff like that. And Bob was very nurturing for me. And, he would wait for me when I would do a scene, and I'd come off the set. He'd be like one of the first ones there to give me a hug and say, that was really good, so on and so forth. And we had a long talk about it once. And it was really beautiful. We said, our two characters are minorities. And so we have to stand up for each other. And it was a beautiful thing. All the people there were great, just great.
Well, I mean, from there, you're a legendary actor who's been in so many classics, and I said again, don't want to embarrass you, but you're a veteran actor who's been in tremendous amounts of. But
I like legendary better than veteran. Yeah.
Well,
I had a choice. Legendary always means he's old, which I am, but I'm in good shape. Everybody,
you get paid more as legendary as opposed to veteran. I think that's generally the difference. But you've not only been in so many amazing films as an actor, but what a lot of people don't realize too is you're a very accomplished writer and also an accomplished director. And one of the things I've noticed in a lot of your writing and directing in some of your projects, but writing, is that you pull from your life experiences as a writer with things like My Giant, Mr. Saturday Night, America's Sweethearts, The Comedians. Do you find it easier to write that way, like to pull from things that Because I remember watching. It might have been one of those PR junkets from America's Sweetheart that you said the story like, we just kept doing these things. I'm like, this is kind of ridiculous. Someone should write a movie about this. And My Giant was about you and Andre and Princess Bride. Like, is that a fertile place for you to write from?
Oh yeah, I think that's you write about what you know, what you feel, and the longer I'm around, the more material I have to draw on, either as a writer or as an actor. Is life experience, and sometimes those aren't fun experiences. But I liken sometimes. My work to Rumpelstiltskin, the fairy tale character who would turn straw into gold, and sometimes you take the straw in your life and you turn it into gold. And I did that, throughout. You have to trust it, that if it's real, and you make it something artistic. There's a line in here today: is I take the truth and make it more interesting.
Yeah.
And as a writer, and that was very true for what 700 Sundays was on Broadway. Was a story of my life and my relationship with my father, both alive and when he passed away, the aftermath of a sudden loss when I was just 15. And so it's real, it's painful, but what happens, Alex, if you tell it the right way, when you're on stage, you see the audience nodding their heads. Mm-hmm. You see them engaged. You feel the laughter. Of course, you feel the tears. It's a very powerful feeling to be on stage, like I did every night for years on Broadway, feeling the audience, feeling your pain because they're feeling their own. And I think that comes with, a confidence that sometimes you just have to unburden yourself and let it go and just hope that it resonates.
Now, there was another movie that you did. I think it was your first. It was, if not your first feature, it was definitely your first feature that you were the star or carried it, which was Rabbit Test.
Ooh,
yes.
I thought this was going to be pleasant. It was my first ever. Yeah, Joan Rivers directed it. It's about the world's first pregnant man. It's a farce. It's
It was fascinating because first of all, it was a woman director back then was a big deal. I remember seeing her, and then she was in the marketing of it, but she wasn't in it, if I'm not mistaken. I remember that.
all the posters. With me with a belly and her pointing to it with it going like this, And with something on her that said director person.
Right, exactly. Said director person.
Joan was, first of all, she was a phenomenal comedian, just hilarious person, and one of the hardest working, funny people I ever met was Joan. Yeah.
Yeah, and was that when you got that job as an actor? You're like, well, I'm a star of a movie. What did that feel like? I mean, back then.
First of all, I wasn't the first choice for that movie.
Okay,
and I have to say it because maybe he'll watch this, but we laugh about it every time we see each other. Dennis Dugan, who directs so many of Adam Sandler's films and is a really good, funny director and was a wonderful actor. He had a series called Richie Brockelman, Private Eye, and he was in Hill Street Blues all the time. And he shot for like a week. He was shooting for a week. So I was at a Dodger game, and I remember there was an announcement. Billy Crystal to the white courtesy phone, please. Billy Crystal to the white courtesy phone. And my wife was pregnant at the time. So I was going, oh no, is this having a baby now? No. So I run to hello, this is Billy, hi, it's Joan. Listen, I made a mistake. Can you come over to the house? She says, you'll start tomorrow. Start tomorrow? What? The movie. It didn't work out with him. It was wrong. And so I have to leave the game, go to her house, go over the script with her, and start the next day. And and that's how that happened.
Wow.
The highlight of that movie for me, and then we're Alex. No matter what you say, we're moving on.
Yes, absolutely.
Was I got to work with Imogene Coca. And Imogene was from the original Sid Caesar, Your Show of Shows, and Caesar's Hour.
Yeah.
She was a genius comedic performer, comedy actress, and I just loved her. So I had a chance to work with her. So that was the highlight for me.
And now we will move on. Now, when you're writing, I always love to ask this about writers. Do you start with character or do you start with plot?
Well, Here Today started with sometimes it's just a whim. It's like, well, what about this? I'd like to do a story about that or something. And then you start like fleshing it out in your mind for weeks, making notes here. And then if you got something, you start to write it. Here Today started totally out of the blue. My co-writer and one of my closest friends ever, Alan Zweibel. Alan was an original Saturday Night Live writer, created Rosanna Dana with Gilda. We've been friends. He was like the first friend I made in when I started doing stand-up. We lived near each other in Long Island, and I would pick him up on our way to a wonderful club called Catch a Rising Star on the Upper East Side of New York. Yeah. We'd hope to get on by 1:00. Then I'd drive him home. I lived an hour outside of Manhattan. We'd listen to our cassette tapes of our shows that we had just done, our sets, and help each other get better. So we were very, very close friends. And then I saw him, and he worked on 700 Sundays with me and collaborated with me on 700 Sundays and was invaluable. And then he's on Letterman, and he's telling this story about this auction luncheon that someone had purchased. He was the prize of this luncheon.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
That someone get to have lunch with him and as we often do, and raise money for a charity. So he's at the restaurant with this woman who's really not into comedy at all. And he said, well, how much did you pay? I'm just curious. For the charity, he says, $22. He says, $2,200? That's good. He goes, no, $22. So now he's sort of like hating her. But she's there. Then she has a reaction to the seafood salad she has. She blows up. She goes into shock. This is true, totally true story. He's telling the story on Letterman. It's hilarious. And he has to take her to the hospital. This total stranger. She doesn't have insurance. And his charity luncheon cost him, I think, like $2,200. So I'm watching the show, and because he's on, and I start typing right away on my computer. And I sent him an email saying, Al, what a hilarious story. This is a great way for two people to meet. Who are they? Where do they go from here? If you're interested, this could be a really, really great way to launch a movie. So we talked the next day, and then we just started. Who could they be? What could happen to them? And I wanted to do a story about an intergenerational teaming. And not a love story, but a love story, but not a romantic love story.
Right.
But a movie about friendship, about support, about empathy, which I feel is so lacking, And then, so now, all right, so then you go, who are they? And so on and so forth. And Alan and I both had a very wonderful relationship with the senior writer at SNL. From the beginning and from when I was there in 84, 85. His name is Herb Sargent. And Herb was in his 50s when everybody wasn't. And he was very much who Charlie Burns is in Here Today. And we just loved him. He was witty. He was funny. He wrote most of the jokes for Weekend Update in the beginning, helped create that section. And he just sort of like would roam around and approve or disapprove of what you're writing. You always asked him, what do you think? And he'd give you an honest answer. And he was just the greatest. And so we thought that was a good guy. And then I was in Penn Station in New York. I was heading out by train, and I saw this little band, this woman singing with a combo in the waiting room at Penn Station. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Then I saw her again in Soho on the street with like a gypsy jazz band. And she was great. And I emailed Alan immediately and said, this is who she could be. She's a performer. She's got bravado. She's sassy. She, and she's got a career that may happen, and so on. And so then we started writing, and then here we are,
Yeah, I can't believe that most of the movie, which by the way I saw, and I had the pleasure of watching, and as I told you before we started recording, it is there's so much heart in the film, and it just almost took my wife and I back, because we're not used to watching content like that anymore, because it's just not something, unless you start going back into older movies of 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. That's what I kind of grew up with, the City Slickers of the world and the When Harry Met Sally. There's heart in those films. There's heart in those stories. And it just was so wonderful. I can't believe that a lot of that was based on a true story, or started at least.
It's a short story he wrote called The Prize, and Alan was the prize. And so it just took off from there. And then, the added element of, that he had suffering from the early onset of a form of dementia was something that I was dealing with a relative of mine who was a novelist. It was my aunt. It was a brilliant woman. And she came to me one day and said, I'm losing my words. I'm losing my word. And I thought that was profound. Yeah. And took care of her. And we thought, well, what if Charlie has that, a funny man who's losing his funny, who's losing his currency, which is his words, is starting to go broke, has a great deal of drama about it. And then, you know, as they become friends, for her to give up a promising career to take care of him is the ultimate kind of friendship, and really defines love. So we decided to go that way, and we did, and we're, you know, it's a really funny movie. Don't get me wrong.
I was about to say, how do you balance that it's a pretty heavy conversation when you're talking about dementia, onset dementia, but yet it is funny and heartfelt. So you really balanced that so beautifully, to the point where it wasn't too sad and it wasn't too funny. It just has a perfect kind of just right balance between them. How do you balance that as a writer and a director?
Well, as you know, as the writer, that's, you know, Al and I were very careful in where we were going, and as a director, it's making it real and trusting the performers. And when you have somebody as wildly funny and charming as Tiffany, and being able to play off her and counterbalance that with his appreciation for her and his affection for her, which grows. So the movie and the story grows on you. Keeping those at the right levels was really, you know, I think the task. And creating a whole other life for him, which I think is, for me, very interesting in a movie about his late wife, who comes to life in his mind, and shooting it with, you know, the subjective camera, which is me, and you get to know her, and you get to love this woman who, you know, was taken from him, and she's funny and she's charming, and so I would shoot her, and I'd be right behind the camera. So she would talk right to the camera. So she's like talking to Charlie. Because when you remember things, Alex, you don't remember them in 2 shots or wide shots, or you just remember what you see. Mm-hmm. So that was you know, I think a choice I made while we were writing. I said I could shoot it this way, because I knew right away I wanted to direct this, and I told Alan I know what this should be, and when that happens, it's a wonderful feeling. I hadn't directed a film
20 years.
In like 20 years from in a movie, which was just on the other night again 61. On HBO, honoring the 20th anniversary of 61, about Maris and Mantle, who I knew very well, and I'm not in that movie, but there's as much of me in 61 as there is in here today. Because I love those guys in that year, but you know, you have to just make sure that the balance is right, and it's a tricky one to pull off, but I know we did.
Now, how do you direct a force of nature like Tiffany Haddish? Like, I mean, she is a literal force of nature as a performer. She's so wonderful, and you guys have all the chemistry in the world, by the way. You could just tell that you love each other. How do you direct that? And not only direct it from off camera, but how do you direct it while you're in the scene with her? Like, that's a juggling act, to say the least.
Oh, for sure. She's a brilliant talent. And she from the time we first met, I told her what I needed from her and what I didn't want from her. Okay. And that, yes. So I said, I need Emma Page. And when there are moments where I need Tiffany, we'll plug those in. Yeah. But you have to, you know, and she was so grateful for the chance, I guess, and looking forward to it so much to stretch her talent. Mm-hmm. And she just gave herself over to what I wanted her to do. And if it wasn't comfortable, we'd talk like you would with any actor or actress. And then there are moments where I just let her sprinkle. You know, they need something here. What do you think? What do we got? I'm here. I'll be right there, you know. And so, and I needed her to get emotional in a way that she hadn't before, which she was very scared of. I said, and I kept telling her to just stay in these moments. It's hard, you know, with movies are frustrating to do because they're forever. And you have to hit that moment. and as many takes as it is, the director needs to satisfy the movie.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
And movies are a collection of moments, so we have to get to a certain place. So there's a moment where she cries, which was very difficult for her to do, but I was sitting there with her on camera, and the camera's behind me, and she was fighting it because that's a natural instinct for anyone not to, show emotion in their life, and she had a tough childhood, and she, would, and she didn't want to get there, but I talked to her just very quietly and it's hard because the crew is all around. Right. So you clear out everybody that doesn't need to be there. It's just me and her and the camera behind us. And I just talked to her, and it came, and suddenly it's there. And it's a beautiful moment where she's listening to Charlie talk about the darkest moment in his life. And it's just bonds them forever. And, I think she has extraordinary personality, and there's so much there for the world to see. And I'm excited for what she's going to do next.
And I kind of can tell when you let her go a little bit, and when it was Emma and when it was Tiffany, because you can kind of sense that while you're watching, because I've watched Tiffany. I've been a huge fan of her, so I can see when she goes off she does Tiffany. When she's Tiffany, you can tell. So like that scene in the bedroom with that's all Tiffany.
Yeah, let her go. And you know what? When we came to that, I said, you know what? It's going. I love it. Yeah. It's just she looks so cute with the way she smiles and looks at him.
It's so great.
And it's just a great little. But those are what Rob Reiner used to call freebies. Those are freebies.
Yeah.
But that's when you work with somebody like that, and they can just do that. It was very exciting to, and I'm sitting opposite her, trying not to laugh and knowing this is good. And then she just went. And then, in the editing room, I just said, no, let's keep that. I want that. Yeah.
Now, you've worked with some of the most remarkable film directors in history, really remarkable, list of people you've worked with. What is the biggest lesson that you've taken from one of those directors, any one of them?
I guess Rob, because Rob's got a fantastic ear. Mm-hmm. Rob does, and there's a line that Charlie says in a meeting with the two other head writers of the show that he works on in the movie, and he turns to her and says, "There's a music to comedy. There were notes."
Yeah, it's a great line.
Notes. And that was very much a Rob thing about when we were doing Harry and Sally, about hearing it the right way. The inflection, which drives Charlie crazy when they
inflection. Oh my God, the inflection thing was that blow up was genius. Oh my God, it was great.
And so I think Rob, sure. And then directing yourself, I learned so much from. I love this guy, Danny DeVito. I just adore Danny.
Yes.
And Throw Mama from the Train is a really, really funny, odd movie. And to watch him handle both things, mm-hmm. Both jobs so effortlessly. And the DP in that movie was Barry Sonnenfeld.
I've had Barry on the show. He's remarkable.
Yeah, and he was a DP. He also shot When Harry Met Sally.
Yes.
And Raising Arizona, and on and on and on. The Coen Brothers movies and those big wide-angle shots and so on.
Gorgeous.
And a hilarious person himself. And so I would say those two guys for sure.
Now, when you're working on When Harry Met Sally, did you? I'm not going to ask you, did you know it was going to be a hit? But did you know that it was going to have this cultural spark as far as like a conversation about men and women? Because when you watch it, you're going, well, yeah, women and men can't be friends. And then you're either on one side or the other. I'm like, yeah, you can. No, you can't. Yeah, you can. No, you can't. Did you guys know when you were writing this, it was going to spark this kind of, it was for people listening, you have to understand in 89 when that came out, I mean, it was everywhere.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It was everywhere.
It was a provocative one-liner. Men and women can't be friends because the sex part always gets in the way.
Right.
That was Nora's, that was their premise. And then, handled in such a beautiful way and witty way and a very realistic way that, and I hope this happens with here today, that people, when a movie ends, they walk up the aisle talking about it and they go out for coffee and they're talking about it. You stimulate conversation, and Harry and Sally definitely that, because, Alex, there's so much is said about the fake orgasm scene because nobody had really used the word orgasm, in a movie except Ron Jeremy. And so,
right. And let alone a fake orgasm. And then to have her do it on camera, that was like mind blowing.
It was mind blowing.
By the way, Rob's mother's line, still arguably the best line in the entire movie. I'll have what she's having. Oh, was it your mom or his mom?
No. It was Rob's mom.
It was Rob. Yeah.
It was the line that I wrote. So I was.
Oh, did? The timing.
But, yeah. Estelle Reiner was one of my favorite people, and the late Carl, of course, was like an uncle and aunt to me. Amazing people. But it got people yapping, that's for sure. And here it is, all these years later, people are discovering it, younger people, and the people who grew up, who were at the right age of falling in love when the movie came out, are now telling their kids to watch it, who are now falling in love. And so the beat moves on, So we had a 30th anniversary screening, I guess, 2 years ago, at the beautiful Chinese theater here in LA, and Meg and I were there, and Rob introduced us, and they brought us out on a love seat, like we are in the end of the movie, and
nice.
And the place went berserk. It was really nice. It was really nice.
That's amazing. Now I'm going to ask you a few questions I ask all my guests. What advice would you give a filmmaker trying to break into the business today?
Have a rich uncle.
That's the best way to get in.
It's so hard. It's so hard, but write something that you believe in, and don't ever get deterred from your goal in your career and in your life. Things happen.
Now, what is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film industry or in life?
I guess patience.
It's mine. Patience is the big one. And 3 of your favorite films of all time, as of right now, not forever, but just today, that you can think of.
Some Like It Hot.
Genius.
Both Godfather films. We'll count them as one.
Obviously.
Obviously. Oh, and it's a movie from the 40s. Every time I see it, I cry. It's called The Best Years of Our Lives, and it just kills me. Myrna Loy, Frederick March, Dana Andrews. It just is. It's just a killer about America after World War II and soldiers returning home. It's just when I need a hit of something I go to that. I just adore that movie.
Now, and where can people watch Here Today? We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
Theaters only, man.
Theaters only.
Yeah.
So 2019 of you.
Fred Bernstein, who's my producing partner, who's a fantastic person, who, from the time he read the script until, till the day we open, has been such a strength for me and the movie, always getting me everything I needed to make the movie the way that I saw it. So we had a lot of offers to stream,
right?
But after a while, the streaming thing, it was great because we couldn't get to theaters, but then everything just sort of got to look like television, and we held out, and then Sony swooped in really like a month and a half ago and said, "We love this, and we want to put it in theaters." If America does what it's supposed to do, and get vaccinated and wear masks all the time, you can get your life back. Yeah. And that's why I don't understand people complaining about it, and then that stops everybody else from getting our life back. We can do this. Mm-hmm. And so they came in and we're in theaters only starting May 7th all across the country. I think we're in 1,200 theaters. And hopefully, Mother's Day, people will want to go and take mom and have a couple laughs and feel something.
It's amazing.
It's a real family experience together.
It is.
And that's about the movie.
And it does spark a conversation. It will spark a conversation without question. But Billy, it has been an absolute honor and pleasure talking to you on the show today. Thank you so much, not only for being on the show, for making Here Today, which I tell everybody you got to go see, but also for the years of just making me laugh and now making my children laugh. It's been a pleasure.
Alex, I'm a veteran.
Yeah, obviously, as a veteran actor, writer, and director. But thank you so much for everything, Billy. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Your pleasure. Nice talking to you.
I truly want to thank Billy Crystal for being on the show. It was an absolute honor to speak to him, to pick his brain about how he does what he does. I mean, he is truly an inspiration. So thank you so much, Billy. If you want to get links to anything we spoke about in this episode, including how to watch Here Today, which is opening today, head over to the show notes at indiefilmhustle.com/466. And guys, I have a big announcement coming in the next few weeks. I have a new something I've been working on for a while now, and I think it's going to really help out the tribe in a big, big way, and hopefully help out independent filmmakers around the world get their projects funded, get their projects produced and distributed. That's all I will say, but I promise you it'll be worth the wait. It'll be out and hopefully in a few weeks, so keep an eye out for that. Thank you again so much for listening, guys. As always, keep that hustle going. Keep that dream alive. Stay safe out there, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Hustle podcast at indiefilmhustle.com. That's INDIEFILMHUSTLE.com.